Number: The cat waited at the same bus stop every night until one driver finally asked why. Every night at exactly 10:17, a gray cat appeared at bus stop 12 on the edge of Millfield Avenue. Not at 10:15, not at 10:20, always 10:17, as precise and inevitable as the ticking of a clock mounted on a wall no one thought to question. The cat did not meow, it did not pace, it did not approach strangers or beg for scraps, or curl into itself against the cold. It simply sat beneath the amber glow of the lamppost at the far end of the shelter, its pale green eyes fixed on the dark stretch of road where the bus always came from. When the bus finally rolled to a stop and the doors wheezed open, the cat rose to all 4 feet. It stepped forward. And then, as the last passenger descended and the doors folded shut again, it sat back down. Every single night, like something wound too tight and left to run. A new driver started noticing on his 3rd week of the route, and on the 7th night, when the doors opened and the cat stepped closer than it ever had before, close enough that he could have reached down and touched it, he felt for the first time that the animal was not watching the bus at all. It was watching for someone who was supposed to be on it. Nobody in the neighborhood knew exactly when the cat had started coming. Most people who lived near Millfield Avenue simply assumed it had always been there. The way certain details of a familiar street blur into background, the cracked pavement, the rusted bench, the lamppost with its warm and steady burn. People began calling the cat Bus Stop Cat without ever sitting down to discuss it. The name just arrived, the way all honest names do, because it described exactly what the animal was. Mrs. Patrice Holloway, who ran a small flower stand 2 blocks away and often walked past the stop on her way home, had tried feeding it once. She had set down a neat little pile of leftover chicken beside the lamppost, backed away respectfully, and watched. The cat looked at the food. Then it looked back down the road. It never touched the chicken. Patrice took it home, shrugged, and told her husband that some animals just had priorities you couldn't argue with. A college student named Derek had tried to pick the cat up one evening, mostly out of curiosity and a mild competitive streak he couldn't quite suppress. The cat tolerated his hands for exactly 2 seconds before twisting free with calm but unmistakable firmness. It landed, resettled beneath the lamppost, and resumed its vigil as though the interruption had not occurred. Derek told his roommates about it later, and they all agreed the cat had more dignity than most people they knew. What the regulars began to notice, those who passed the stop often enough to form an impression, was not just the cat's presence but the precision of it. The animal materialized at approximately 10 minutes past 10, always from the same direction, always settling in the same spot beneath the lamp. It remained through the arrival of the 10:17 bus. And then, no later than 10:25, it would rise quietly and walk back the way it had come, disappearing into the dark between the streetlights as though following a schedule printed somewhere only it could read. The amber glow of the lamppost became inseparable from the image of the cat. Bus Stop 12, with its green painted number board, became the backdrop to something nobody had named yet, but everyone felt quietly, a small, insistent sadness that sat in the chest without making a sound. Marcus Webb had been driving the Route 7 line for 11 years before he transferred to Route 12 on a personnel reshuffling he hadn't asked for and hadn't particularly wanted. He was 44, recently divorced in the quiet, exhausted way of 2 people who had simply run out of things to say to each other, and he lived alone in a 1-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a building, where the elevator worked about 60% of the time. His life had taken on a texture he recognized as routine without quite knowing when it had happened. The alarm at 5:40, the instant coffee, the morning route, the afternoon layover, the evening route, the drive home, the television left on as company. He noticed the cat on his 3rd night on the line, the way a person notices something that interrupts an otherwise smooth surface. It was strange, and strange things caught his eye. By the 5th night, he was slowing the bus a little more deliberately at stop 12, taking an extra moment before pulling away, watching the animal in the rearview mirror as it settled back beneath the lamppost. By the 9th night, he had started thinking about it between runs. Not obsessively, he was a practical man, but with a low, persistent attention that reminded him of the way a melody gets caught in the mind without being fully remembered. There was something about the cat that did not read as simple stray behavior. Strays moved with a different energy, loose and opportunistic. This cat moved like something carrying a specific intention. It arrived at a specific time, held a specific position, oriented itself in a specific direction, and departed at a specific interval. It was not wandering, it was waiting. One night, after the last passenger had stepped off, and before he pulled away, Marcus leaned out the open door and said, quietly, "Hey." The cat looked at him, not startled, just looked, then it looked back down the road. Marcus sat with that for a moment. He had the strange and slightly uncomfortable feeling of being politely declined. He pulled the door shut and drove on, but the image of those pale green eyes stayed with him through the rest of the route and into his apartment, and into the dark behind his own closed eyes. He began to understand, in the gradual way understanding works when no one hands it to you, that he and the cat had more in common than he would have admitted out loud. Both of them showed up at the same place at the same time every night. Both of them maintained their positions in the amber-lit dark. Both of them were waiting for something that did not come. It was on a Thursday, in late October. Marcus had been on the route for just under 3 weeks that he first saw the cat arrive with something in its mouth. He almost missed it. The animal appeared as always from the dark between the streetlights, but there was something different about the angle of its jaw, the slight lowering of its head. It crossed the concrete apron of the stop and set the object down on the ground beside the lamppost with deliberate care. Marcus leaned forward at the wheel. He could not make it out clearly from inside the bus. It was small and flat, not food, not a piece of debris. It looked like something crafted, something shaped with human hands. He watched the cat sit with it. The bus arrived. The doors opened. The handful of passengers at that hour stepped down without noticing the cat, without noticing the small object on the ground. The cat rose as always, stepped forward as always, and when the doors closed and the bus pulled away, the cat picked the object back up in its mouth and carried it with it when it left. Marcus thought about that object for the rest of the night. The following evening, he arrived at stop 12, with a small flashlight tucked in his jacket pocket. He timed his stop to allow a few extra minutes, waited until the other passengers had boarded, and walked to the lamppost while the cat sat regarding him with its composed and unreadable patience. The object was already on the ground. Up close, in the beam of his flashlight, it was unmistakably a collar, a cat's collar, small and worn, the kind with a little breakaway buckle and a ring where a tag once hung. The tag was gone. The fabric was frayed at one edge, faded from what might once have been a deep burgundy to the color of old rust. It had clearly been on an animal for years. There was no name embroidered on it, no letters printed anywhere visible, just the bare evidence of something that had once been new and had since passed through a great deal of time. Marcus stood in the lamplight and looked at the collar and then at the cat. The cat looked back at him with those pale green eyes that held neither warmth nor hostility, only that quality he had come to think of as pure attention. It occurred to him that the collar might have been the cat's own. The size was right, but why carry it here? Why set it down at this specific spot and then take it back? He returned to the bus. He did not touch the collar. It felt wrong to touch it, the way it would feel wrong to move something someone had deliberately placed. The neighborhood's working theory, assembled over months of small conversations between Patrice Holloway and Derek, and the older man who walked his beagle past the stop each night, was that the cat had been abandoned. Someone had dropped it off, or moved away and left it behind, or simply stopped caring. It was the most available explanation, and it fit the visible facts. A cat without an obvious home, appearing at a transit stop, behaving in ways that suggested displacement. Marcus had accepted this theory without much examination because it was the one that existed and he had not yet had reason to look for another. He had even, in a moment of determined helpfulness, contacted a local shelter about taking the cat in. A volunteer named Gail had come out with a carrier on a Wednesday evening. The cat allowed itself to be placed inside with a calmness that surprised everyone present. Marcus had driven home that night, feeling something adjacent to resolution. By Friday, the cat was back beneath the lamppost at 10:17. Gail called the next morning to report, with genuine bewilderment, that the cat had sat quietly in its shelter kennel for approximately 36 hours and then, when a staff member left a door improperly latched, had walked out without apparent urgency, and had not been recovered. The shelter was only 1.5 miles from stop 12. The cat had covered that distance and been back in position before the evening bus arrived. Marcus brought food the following Tuesday. High-quality wet food in a shallow dish, left beside the lamppost before the cat arrived, so there would be no pressure, no expectation. He watched from the bus. The cat arrived, stepped around the dish without breaking stride, and took its place beneath the lamp. It did not eat. It did not sniff the dish. It gave the food the same gentle irrelevance it gave to everything that was not the road. The working theory began to feel thin. A cat that was merely lost or abandoned would eat when fed. A cat in distress would seek contact. This cat was not in distress. It was in pursuit of something specific, and nothing that was offered in place of that thing held any interest for it whatsoever. Marcus sat with the wrong answer long enough to start feeling its wrongness, the way a shoe feels wrong before you look down and notice it is on the wrong foot. Something did not fit. He just did not yet know what. He started asking questions the following week. Not with urgency, he was not the urgent type, but with a steady, methodical patience that had served him well over 11 years of keeping a large vehicle on schedule through all manner of weather and traffic and human unpredictability. He asked the 2 drivers who had worked Route 12 before him. One of them, a heavy-set man named Phil who had transferred to the depot's administrative side after a knee surgery, remembered the cat clearly. That gray one? Yeah, it's been there a while. At least a year, maybe longer. I always figured it was just a neighborhood cat. Phil paused, scratching the back of his neck. Actually, there was a guy. Used to get off at that stop every night. Regular as anything. Older fella, kept to himself. He stopped riding the line, and I figured he moved or changed jobs. That was around when the cat showed up, now that I think about it. Could be coincidence. Marcus checked with the Transit Authority's records office the following day. He was looking for anything that might correspond a regular pass user, a complaint, a note. He found nothing definitive, but the woman at the records desk mentioned that the stop cameras had a roughly 14-month archive, and if he wanted to look, he was welcome to. He looked. It took him 3 evenings to go through enough footage to find what he was looking for. Moving through the compressed, grainy files in the small back room that smelled of old coffee and printer toner, he found the cat's first appearance a night in late September of the previous year. Unmistakably the same animal, sitting in the same position under the same light. And going back 2 nights before that appearance, he found something else. A man, getting off the 1017 bus, standing for a moment in the lamplight with a small canvas bag over one shoulder, then walking away down Millfield Avenue, south, toward the residential blocks that sat behind the hardware store and the dry cleaner. The man appeared in the footage every single night for months before that. Always the same bus, always the same stop, and then one night he was not there. And then the next night, the cat appeared. Marcus drove to Millfield Avenue on his day off. He was not sure what he expected to find, or what he would do with whatever he found. He went anyway, because not going felt worse than going. He knocked on doors. Most people on that block had lived there for years and remembered their neighbors with the low-grade familiarity of proximity. On the 4th door, a woman named Beverly answered. She was in her late 60s, with the calm, practical affect of someone who had navigated a great deal of life without theatrics. She listened to Marcus's description, the man, the bus, the 1017 stop, and her expression shifted into something that was not surprise, so much as the recognition of a known sorrow. His name had been Harold Greer. He had lived 4 houses down, the one with the green shutters, for more than 20 years. He had worked a night custodial shift at an office building downtown, taking the last bus home each night because he had never owned a car. He had been a quiet man, not unfriendly, but self-contained, the kind of neighbor who waved reliably and kept his yard clean and did not impose. He had died 14 months ago, a heart condition that had apparently been progressing quietly for some time. He had been found by a meals delivery volunteer when he had not answered for 2 days. Beverly said he had lived alone since his wife passed, years before, but he had not been without company. He had a cat, a gray cat, she said, that he had found as a kitten behind the laundromat on Fletcher Street and brought home in his jacket pocket. The cat had been with him for 7 years. She paused, and then said, more carefully, "He used to tell me that cat waited for him every night, right at the door. He'd come in from the late bus and it would be there. He thought the world of it." Marcus sat in his car outside Harold Greer's house, with the green shutters, for a long time. He looked at the dark windows and the neat, untended yard, and he thought about a man coming home late every night to a door where something warm and alive was waiting. He thought about what it meant to always come home to the same thing in the same place, and how, if you were that thing, you would not understand why the door had stopped opening. You would just know that it used to open and that you were supposed to be there when it did. The cat had not been abandoned. It had not been lost. It had simply continued doing the only thing it knew, waiting at the last place where the world had made sense. 10:17, because that was when Harold's bus arrived. The lamppost on Millfield, because that was where Harold's feet had touched the ground every night for years. The collar, carried from wherever Harold's things had ended up, because it was the closest physical remnant of a life that had gone quiet without explanation. The cat did not understand death. It understood routine and love and the specific gravity of a person who always came home. And the person had stopped coming home, and the cat had gone to the last place it knew to look, and it had waited there, and it was still waiting. Marcus drove home that night and sat in his apartment for a long time without turning on the television. The next evening, he arrived at stop 12 a few minutes before his scheduled run and stood for a moment outside the bus, watching the cat take its place beneath the lamppost. The animal settled into position with the same gravity it always had, the same still orientation toward the dark road, pale green eyes reflecting the amber light. He had thought, driving over, that he might tell someone, file something with the shelter, contact a rescue organization, make a phone call. But standing there in the lamplight, he understood that none of those things were what this moment required. The cat was not a problem to be solved. It was a grief being carried in the only form available to it. He said, quietly, "He's not coming back." The words felt inadequate the moment they left his mouth, which was appropriate, because they were. The cat did not move. It looked at him with those clear and ancient eyes, and then returned its gaze to the road. Marcus nodded, as though accepting a correction. He pulled away that night with a different weight in his chest than the one he had carried before. Not heavier exactly, more specific. A known weight is always more bearable than an unknown one. He stopped at the store on his way home and bought a small bag of good dry food and a soft blanket that he folded and placed in a canvas bag. The following night, after the last passenger had stepped off at stop 12, he climbed down from the bus and sat on the bench in the shelter, not beside the cat, which was maintaining its position under the lamp as always, but close enough that his presence was clear and unhurried. He opened the bag of food and set some out in a bowl he had brought from home. He did not look at the cat. He looked at the road, the same direction the cat looked, and he waited alongside it, saying nothing. The cat did not eat that night. It did not move from its spot, but it did, at one point, turn its head and look at Marcus for a moment that lasted slightly longer than the usual dismissive glance. Then it looked back at the road. Marcus took that as a beginning. He came back the next night with the bowl and the same calm patience. And the night after that, he did not push. He did not reach out or make sounds or try to create an interaction. He simply appeared and sat and waited in parallel with the animal, as though the two of them were engaged in the same quiet vigil for different reasons that somehow amounted to the same thing. On the 8th night, the cat ate from the bowl. Not eagerly, it ate the way it did everything else, with careful deliberation, as though each action required its full consideration. But it ate, and when it finished, it did not immediately take up its position under the lamp again. It sat for a moment in the space between the lamp and the bench where Marcus was sitting, looking at nothing in particular, in a posture that had slightly less of the forward tension he had come to associate with its waiting. Marcus did not make anything of it out loud. He just watched, and felt something loosen in his own chest by approximately the same amount. The following week, for the first time in 14 months, the cat came and sat beside him on the bench before the bus arrived. Not touching him, there was still a careful 6 inches of space between them, but beside him, facing the same direction, carrying what it carried alongside someone who was carrying something of his own. Marcus looked down at the animal and it looked up at him, and neither of them said anything, which was the correct response. Weeks passed in this way. The collar still appeared on some nights, set carefully on the ground near the lamppost, returned to wherever the cat kept it when the vigil was over. Marcus never touched it. He understood it was not his to touch. Then one night in early December, when the cold had settled properly over Millfield Avenue and the lamppost light had taken on that quality of winter amber that is softer and somehow older than the light of other seasons, Marcus noticed something different. He had opened the bus door at stop 12, as he always did. He was watching the cat from the driver's seat, waiting for the familiar ritual of rising, stepping forward, stopping, but the cat did not step toward the door this time. It sat on the bench, their bench now, in the informal taxonomy of regular occupation, and it watched the door without getting up. It looked at Marcus. It looked at the open door, and then it looked at Marcus again, and something in that look had shifted from the fixed, forward-facing grief he had come to know into something more present, more immediate, more directed at what was actually in front of it rather than what was supposed to arrive. Marcus understood. He pulled the door fully open and stepped down. He did not pick the cat up. He crouched at the bottom of the steps and waited, and after a moment the cat walked forward, considered him from a distance of about 12 inches, and then stepped past him and up into the bus with the same deliberate calm it applied to everything. It found the long seat behind the driver's partition, the one that ran along the side of the vehicle, and was almost always empty this late in the evening, and it lay down on it with the ease of an animal that has made a decision and intends to keep it. Marcus drove the rest of the route with the cat lying on the seat behind him. At each stop, the doors opened, passengers stepped in or out, and the cat observed with mild interest and stayed where it was. When the route ended and the garage came into view, the cat was asleep. One paw extended slightly over the edge of the seat, the amber light of passing street lamps moving over its gray fur in slow stripes. Stop 12 was still there on Millfield Avenue. The lamppost still burned its warm and steady burn at 10:17. The green-painted number board still read 12. Somewhere in a quiet apartment, a gray cat slept through the nights it no longer spent waiting. Curled on a cushion Marcus had placed on the floor near the radiator, in a space that was slowly filling with the accumulated weight of 2 lives becoming, incrementally and without announcement, a household. There would be nights, for a long time, when the cat would sit by the window at a certain hour and look out at the dark street below with a stillness that Marcus recognized. He did not try to interrupt it. Some losses do not resolve, they only find new arrangements, new shapes in which to exist alongside the living. Harold Greer had loved a small gray animal for 7 years and had gone out one night and not come home, and the animal had done the only thing it knew how to do in response to that silence. It had gone to the last place where everything had made sense, and it had waited. And Marcus Webb, who had his own version of a vigil and his own version of a road he watched every night without expecting much to arrive, had finally asked the right question, which was not why the cat waited, but rather what it might mean to stop waiting alone. The 10:17 bus still ran. It always would, carrying its passengers through the amber dark of Millfield Avenue, stopping at the green-painted shelter where a lamppost held its light above an empty bench. The bench was not sad. Benches are not sad. They are simply places where things begin and things end. And sometimes, if the hour is right and 2 kinds of loneliness find themselves in the same lamplight, things begin again. Not everyone who leaves will come back. That is the oldest and most unavoidable fact of any life spent loving something. But every creature that has ever loved deserves to be waited for. And every creature that has waited long enough deserves, at last, to be found.